Okay, this is a beginner's tutorial on the Cisco iOS and command line interface and how to run commands on a router. So first of all, we'll start with a router. So I'll click on routers here. I'll grab a generic router, the first generic router right here. Then end devices. I'm going to get a PC. And what we're going to do is we're going to say, pretend this is a brand new router, and we've got a computer here, and we're going to make a console connection to the router. So we'll go to connections, we'll grab a console port or console cable, and we'll attach it to the serial port on the computer, and then drag up, and then click on the router, and then click on the console port. And so this is a virtual console connection from a PC to a router. Okay, and now we can also virtually set up a terminal session to the router. So click on the PC and we'll go to desktop, and you'll see that terminal is an emulator for hyperterminal, typically on a computer. Also, you could use on your computer, you could use PuTTY if you wanted to set up a console connection to your router. So we'll just click on terminal. It's got the default configurations already set for you, so all you have to do is click OK, and what you're left with is a dialog screen that you would see on if you had a brand new router out of the box with basically an empty configuration file or no configuration file. And you can see here that the router has booted. You can see here the bootstrap, and then some copyright information, some opening information, and then here at the bottom it says System Configuration Dialog. Now this is a wizard that will walk you through step by step configuring an initial configuration of your router. But typically in the Cisco class, you don't use this line-by-line wizard for configuring your router, so we'll just type in no here. So I've typed in no and hit enter, and then you'll see a please return to get started message, and press return, and there you are. You're left with a prompt. It says router with the user privileged or user exec mode prompt right there. Okay, and so it's ready to take commands. So even though this PC virtual terminal connection is really great, and it looks like we're configuring this router, I could probably get this text a little bit bigger in the interest of the video tutorial by just clicking on the router and then clicking on command line interface, and I've set the font to be a little bit bigger, which I think works better for the tutorial. So I'm going to just use the router's virtual command line interface. So press return, and I can keep pressing return here, and this is the user exec prompt, right? This greater than sign. And if I want to get to the different command modes, so this is the basic command mode. In this command mode, what we can do is, before we do that, I'll just type in a question mark, and it shows me all of the commands that are available in this basic level user exec command mode. So you can see I can run a telnet command, I could run an SSH command. I have access to a few of the show commands, right? Let's take a look at that. So we'll type in show, and then space, and then a question mark, and you can see here that I can do a show ARP, a show CDP, right? But I cannot do a show running configuration or startup configuration, but I can do a show version command. So I have access to some of the show commands. Also, if I type question mark again and hit enter, you can see here that I have access to the ping command, and then if I want to get to a more privileged mode, see it says here turn on privileged commands, I can type enable and to get to a higher mode, command mode on the router. So that's what I'll do here. I'll type in enable and hit enter, and now the prompt changes from a greater than sign to a pound sign, which indicates that I'm now in privileged exec mode, privileged user mode. Okay, so now in privileged exec mode, I have access to even more commands. So if you type question mark, you'll see that the commands run through to another screen. If I want to see the rest of the screen or the rest of the commands, I can hit enter and look at them line by line, or I can hit the space bar to look at another screen worth of the commands. And so then these are all the commands that you have available to you in privileged exec mode. And then to get to configuration mode, or what's called global configuration mode, you type in configure space terminal and hit enter, and then you'll see the word config in between parentheses and then a pound sign, and that indicates that you are in global configuration mode. And this is the mode that you could use to change the router name, to configure your interfaces, to turn on routing protocols, you name it, all kinds of stuff. For instance, if I want to change this the name of this router to, let's see here, say type in host name, right? Host name, and then if you're not sure what the rest of the command is, you'll just hit a space and type question mark, and then it tells you a word. You need a word, the system's network's name, so it tells you exactly what to do. So what I'll do is I'll just type in the name, I'll type in Dan's Courses, and now the router's name is Dan's Courses. Or I could type in host name R1, which is something you typically see, and now the router's host name is R1. Okay, now that we have changed the router's host name, we want to save this to the configuration file. And to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out of this mode and go back to privileged mode. And to do that, what I can do is I can just hit Control C, which will take me out of that mode, and I can hit enter, and again, and now you see here I'm back in privileged mode, and now I want to save that configuration. So I'm going to say copy, running, and I'm going to do another thing here. I've typed in run, and then I'm going to hit tab, and then it tab completes to the full command, which is running -config. Right? So I'm going to copy the running configuration, running config, space, and I'll type STA, and then I'll hit tab, and it tab completion finishes it for me, finishes the command for me, which is startup config. And this command will copy the running configuration file in RAM to the startup configuration file, which is saved in NVRAM, or non-volatile RAM. So if I do that, it'll ask me the destination file name. I can give it a file name here, or I can accept the default, which is startup-config, and that's what we usually do in class, is accept the default, hit enter, and it builds the configuration file, and I've saved the configuration file. So now if I was to restart the router, the configuration, the host name R1, will be saved. The router command line interface reminds me a lot of a Linux terminal command line interface. So if I want to go back in the history of the commands that I've used on each command mode, all I have to do is hit up arrow, and it will cycle through. As I keep hitting up arrow, it'll cycle through the commands that I've used in my history. That's another one of the features that it has. If I want to look at my running configuration file, which is something that I do quite a bit, I'm going to type show. And show commands are very important. If you want to see all of the show commands from privileged exec mode, you type in show and then space and then a question mark. But in this case, I'm just going to say I want to show the run. I'm going to hit tab completion, show the running configuration, and this shows me the running configuration file. So the running configuration file shows me the version of essentially the I believe that's the version of the iOS. It shows me a couple of default commands that are in the configuration file by default. Notice the host name R1, and then not much else. If I hit more, spacebar, you can see that I have interfaces here. For instance, interface fast Ethernet 00, fast Ethernet 10, but there's no IP address, and the interface has been shut down. So administratively shut down by default. I'm going to hit more again, spacebar, and you can see here that we have administrative interfaces. We have line console 0. This is my console connection, which I can configure, and this is line virtual terminal. This is this is an administrative configuration or administrative interface for Telnet or SSH, and you can see line VTY. You have 0 space 4. That means I can set up 5 or configure 5 virtual terminals that I can connect to the router with. So I'll be showing you how to configure those as well. I'll hit more again, spacebar.